Everyone in town knew that Granny had her own gospel, not the one bound in leather with gold leaf, but a gospel she wrote in her own mind, rules etched as sharp as fence wire, passed down in her kitchen, her porch, her glare. She could tell you how coffee ought to be poured, how children ought to be raised, how a man ought to speak, and heaven help you if you didn't follow. They called it the gospel according to Granny, half as a joke, half as survival instinct. And Elias, her quiet grandson, the one who unnerved half the town with his calm, stood at the centre of it, whether he wanted to or not. Her rules versus his silence. Granny believed a man should be quick with his words, firm with his opinions, and loud enough so no one mistook him for weak. Elias believed the opposite, that words should be few, timed like seeds planted only when the ground was ready. To Granny, that silence was infuriating. "I swear," she told the ladies at the cafe one morning, stirring her coffee hard enough to rattle the spoon, "that boy could watch the house burn down and not raise his voice. Makes me want to shake him till the words fall out." But in the same breath, she bragged, "He never backtalks, never mouths off like these other young men. I'll give him that. He's steady, even if he drives me mad." That was Granny, love and scorn folded into the same sentence. The cafe incident. The day Leroy exploded in the cafe, Granny was there, fork in hand, gravy cooling on her plate. She watched Elias sit through a storm of insults like he was listening to rain. It lit her temper like a fuse. "Say something," she hissed across the room. "You're making him crazy." When Elias didn't, she felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not because of Leroy's cruelty, but because she thought the whole cafe was watching her grandson look like a fool. Her pride was on the line. And when Leroy was hauled out in cuffs, Granny muttered to anyone listening, "Silence ain't strength. Silence is weakness dressed up pretty." But weeks later, when people whispered that Elias had broken Leroy without lifting a finger, she smirked. Well, maybe the boy ain't as dumb as he looks. Granny never gave Elias a clean compliment. That was her way. Cut with one hand, mend with the other. Her defense of Leroy. When the news spread that Leroy might be deported, illegal from Canada, as it turned out, Elias finally spoke up at the table. Calm as always, he said, "Well, if he broke the law, they ought to deport him." Granny nearly spit her coffee. "Don't you go talking like that, Elias. That boy may be a hothead, but he's one of ours now. You think you're so righteous? Half this town bends rules. What makes him different?" In truth, Granny didn't care about Leroy's fate. She cared about control. If Elias's words hinted at judgment, she took it as a challenge to her authority. To her, siding with Leroy wasn't about justice. It was about putting Elias back in his place. And yet, later that night, she sat on her porch and muttered to herself, "Lord, maybe he's right. Maybe trouble ought to be shown the door, but I'll be damned if I let him think he knows better than me." Stories she told about him. Granny had endless stories about Elias. Some sharp, some grudgingly soft. The time he refused to argue. He was 12, and his cousin called him a coward in front of everyone. That boy just looked at him, calm as a preacher, and walked away. Made the cousin look twice as foolish, and it made me twice as mad. Silence ain't how you win fights, but somehow it worked. The time he fixed the roof. Storm tore half the shingles loose. Everyone was fussing about money and nails. Elias just went up there with a hammer, quiet as the moon, and had it done by sunset. Didn't say a word the whole time. Made me look bad, 'cause I was the one still talking when he finished. The time he walked away from gossip. We were at the salon, and folks started running their mouths about the neighbours. Elias said nothing, just sat there reading the paper. One woman finally said, "What you too holy to join in?" He just smiled. I was burning inside, but later I heard the same women say, "Maybe he's the only one of us with sense." Drives me nuts when his silence does what my words never could. Granny's own confession. If you caught her alone, late evening, a cigarette glowing between her fingers, her voice softened by fatigue, she admitted things she'd never say in public. "That boy's strange," she'd mutter. "Too calm for this world. Makes me wonder if he really does walk closer to God than the rest of us. Not that I'd ever tell him so. Can't puff his head up. But sometimes I think maybe he ain't quiet 'cause he's slow. Maybe he's quiet 'cause he hears things the rest of us don't." Then she'd stub the cigarette out hard, as if ashamed of the thought, and stomp back into the house. Granny as witness. Even when she defended Leroy in public, even when she mocked Elias for being too still, the truth slipped out in her contradictions. People would shake their heads and whisper, "Granny's mouth says one thing, but her eyes tell another. She knows he's different. She just won't admit it." And over time, even her sharpest criticisms became part of Elias's legend. Folks would quote her insults as proof, because if a woman as tough as Granny couldn't rattle him, maybe he really was a friend of God. That's one deep slice, Granny's full portrait around my max stretch here, 1200 words. Do you want me to keep stacking second thread? He isn't bragging, it's more like testimony, turning his study into a lesson about peace, patience, and walking with God. Scene: the community centre evening. It was a Wednesday night, a drafty hall at the community centre. A handful of younger folks sat scattered in folding chairs, notebooks in their laps. They'd asked Elias to speak because word got around that he'd passed the TOEFL without the usual stress or cram sessions. Elias stood at the front, no slides, no textbook, just his journal in one hand. He began quietly. "I didn't pass the TOEFL because I was smarter than anybody else. I passed because I stopped letting fear run the study table. I treated it the same way I treat life. Listen first. Speak slow. Write steady." The room hushed. He flipped open his journal and read. Day 1, listened to radio, not for answers but for rhythm. Day 20, wrote an essay, not for the grade but to see if I could tell the truth plain. Day 60, spoke into the mirror, slow enough I could see peace in my own eyes. A student raised her hand. "But how did you keep from getting nervous? I freeze when the timer starts." Elias smiled. "I remembered it's not me on trial, it's just words, and words belong to God first. If I lose some, he'll give me more tomorrow." They scribbled that down like scripture. He walked them through each section, not as tricks, but as habits. Listening. Pretend every clip is a neighbour. Don't rush. Let them finish. Speaking. Pause before you answer. A pause is not weakness, it's power. TOEFL graders like clarity, not speed. Reading. Underline what breathes. Don't choke on every word. Writing. Write as if someone will read it in 20 years. Would you still stand by it? One boy asked what his score was. Elias shrugged. 95. Enough. Don't worship numbers, worship God, and let numbers fall where they may. When it ended, the students didn't rush out. They lingered in the silence, as if the room itself had stilled. One whispered, "He made it sound like a walk with God, not a test." Another said, "Maybe that's why he passed, because he wasn't chasing it." On the way out, Granny, who had tagged along just to see what nonsense her grandson was peddling, muttered to a neighbour, "He makes studying sound like praying. Lord help us." But later, she admitted under her breath, "If I'd had that kind of peace in school, I might have learned something too." Elias at the community centre. Elias walks to the front, no microphone, just his small leather journal in hand. He waits a moment before speaking, letting the chairs creak and settle. "I didn't pass the TOEFL because I'm clever. I passed because I stopped being afraid of it. Fear makes your tongue heavy, your ears deaf, your mind scattered. God didn't give us that spirit, so I studied with peace instead of panic. Let me tell you how." He opens his journal, flips a few pages, reads in a steady voice. Day 1. I listened to the radio. Not to hunt for words, but to catch the rhythm. English has a hum, like water running. You don't grab every drop, you just hear the flow. Day 20, I wrote an essay, not to chase a score, but to see if I could say something plain and true. Day 60, I spoke into the mirror. I waited before answering, slow enough I could see peace in my own eyes. He looks up, a student raises her hand timidly. Student, what about the timer? I freeze when it starts. Then let the timer run. Remember, the test isn't judging your worth, only your words. And words don't belong to you first, they belong to God. If you lose some today, he'll hand you more tomorrow. He lets the silence sit. Several students nod, writing quickly. Elias, the test has 4 parts. I'll give you what I learned in each one. Simple, nothing fancy. Listening. Pretend every clip is a neighbour talking on a porch. Don't rush ahead. Don't finish their sentence for them. Just let them speak. Speaking. Pause before you answer. A pause is not weakness, it's power. TOEFL graders like clarity more than speed. A steady river carries more than a flood. Reading. Underline what breathes. Don't choke yourself trying to swallow every word. Read for meaning, not for show. Writing. Write as if someone will read it 20 years from now. Would you stand by it? If yes, then it's worth handing in. Another student leans forward. What was your score? 95 out of 120. Enough. Enough for schools, enough for work. Don't worship numbers, worship God, and let the numbers fall where they may. A ripple of laughter, not mocking but eased. The tension in the room melts a little. Elias, I'll leave you with this. The TOEFL isn't a wall. It's a mirror. It shows you what you carry inside. If you carry fear, it magnifies fear. If you carry peace, it magnifies peace. Decide now what you'll bring to it. He closes his journal gently. For a long beat, no one moves. Then the students start clapping, hesitant, then warm. A few linger in the silence, as if they want to keep the calm in their chest a little longer. Later, Granny, sitting in the back row with her arms crossed, muttered, "He makes studying sound like praying. Lord help us." But on the way home, she admitted under her breath, "Still, I can't argue with results." Would you like me to expand this even more into a multi-session workshop? So Elias's talk. It started in the kitchen, a lazy Saturday afternoon. Elias cracked eggs into a bowl, humming low, while Granny puffed by the window. "Elias, you know, Granny, there's more than one way to cook an omelette." Gra snaps upright, cigarette ash spilling. "Don't start with that nonsense. An omelette's an omelette. One way, flip once, cheese in the middle, done. Anything else is heresy." Elias just smiled and kept whisking. He didn't argue. He folded in onions, let the pan sizzle. But Granny's face reddened. She stormed into the living room, muttering about false gospels and corrupting tradition. By the time Gramps came in, her voice had risen so high he thought Elias must have disrespected her. "Gramps, boy, did you sass your Granny?" "Granny, he's spreading lies, saying there's more than one way. Call the law. I won't live with rebellion under my roof." Gramps, half out of patience himself, did the unthinkable. He dialed the sheriff. Granny rode downtown, still hollering about omelettes and order. Elias stayed calm, served up his plate, even left one warm for her on the stove. When asked later why he didn't defend himself, he only said, "Truth doesn't wrestle over eggs. I wasn't going to add anger to the pan." Granny spent one night in the county jail for disturbing the peace. She came back sheepish but still clinging to her line. The smell of smoke returned to the porch the next morning. Yet Elias never once raised his voice. He just set another pan on the stove, cracked 2 more eggs and said quietly, "More than one way, Granny, but only one truth." Want me to write Granny's rant in full voice, her gospel blend? Real businesses in Nashville with documented negative feedback, stuff people actually left as Google or TripAdvisor reviews, and then weaving in Elias as the fictional knuckle-down hero who turned things around. I didn't find any real review where an employee named Elias swoops in, but I did find a few places in Nashville that folks really vented about. From there, I've imagined how Elias might have shown up and reset the story. Let's go through 2 examples. Example 1, Hyatt House, Nashville, Vanderbilt. Real complaint. A guest wrote, "The hotel was beautiful, but the customer service was terrible. First, I had booked online and had my confirmation paperwork, but..." TripAdvisor. Fictional intervention by Elias. After that review went up, Elias, working just behind the scenes as an assistant manager, saw the complaint flag in real time and stepped in. He called the guest, apologized for the mix-up, personally rebooked her room at the same rate, and arranged a local lunch voucher while she waited. The guest edited her review. "Their service turned around 180 degrees. Elias called me, smoothed it all out, and now I'm sticking around for another night." Example 2. Antique Archaeology, Mike Wolf's Nashville store. Real complaint. Customers griped that it was overpriced, with way more souvenir-type merchandise than real antiques. One said, "Store was smaller than expected. Not many antiques. All very pricey." The Sun fictional twist with Elias. Enter Elias, part-time in guest relations. He overheard the disappointment and invited the customer into the back, pulled out 3 hidden picker's picks, real antiques off the floor, showed their provenance, and gave a goodwill discount for their trouble. The online review transformed into, "At first I was let down, tourist trinkets everywhere, but then Elias escorted me behind the scenes, showed me pieces with real stories, and made it worthwhile." Why this works. You get the feel of real-life frustration. Day 1 with Elias, a TOEFL story lesson. The classroom door creaked open. Elias stood by the chalkboard, smiling with quiet energy. "Hello," he said slowly, his voice steady. "I am Elias. Welcome to class." A few students nodded. One whispered, "Hello." Elias raised his hand. "Again, repeat with me. Hello." The whole room answered, "Hello. Good morning," Elias continued. "Say it with me. Good morning." The students echoed, "Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good evening. Good evening." Elias chuckled softly. "Now, goodbye." The class laughed, but repeated, "Goodbye." He turned to Anna, sitting near the front. "Anna, how are you?" Anna answered carefully, "I am fine, thank you. And you?" Elias smiled. "I am fine too. Goodbye, Anna." Anna giggled. "Goodbye, teacher." The rhythm of greetings filled the air until everyone could trade them without fear. Elias picked up a piece of chalk and wrote 2 words. "I am." "This," he said, "is power. With I am, you can tell the world who you are." He pointed at the first student. "Say I am happy." "I am happy." Again, "I am happy." The next student tried, "I am tired." Elias nodded. "Good. I am tired too, but I am ready." One by one, the room filled with voices. "I am hungry. I am thirsty. I am strong. I am weak. I am young. I am old." Each sentence felt like a step across a bridge, simple but strong. Elias didn't rush. He let the words land like footsteps. Finally, he said, "I am a student." He pointed to himself. "I am a teacher." The class repeated, smiling now, "I am a student. You are a teacher." Elias walked to a desk, lifted a book and asked, "What is this?" The class answered together, "This is a book." "Good. Whose book is this?" A boy raised his hand. "It is my book." Elias held up a pen. "This is my pen." He pointed to a student. "That is your pen." The student repeated shyly, then louder, "That is my pen." Around the room, objects became lessons. A chair, a bag, a key, a phone. "This is her bag. That is his chair. This is our table. That is their house." Each phrase echoed again and again until it felt natural. To close the lesson, Elias led the class through cycles. "I am happy, I am sad, I am tired, I am ready." "This is my book, that is your pen. This is his chair, that is her bag." Students paired up. At school, "I am a student. This is my notebook." At home, "What is this?" "This is my key." At the market, "Hello, how are you? I am hungry. This is my apple. That is your banana." The stories turned simple English into real-life practice. As the sun lowered outside, Elias clapped once. The room grew quiet. "We learned greetings. We learned I am. We learned objects and ownership. Now you can speak. You can answer. You can ask." He walked to the door and smiled back at the class. "Goodbye. See you tomorrow. Take care." And together, the students replied, steady and sure, "Goodbye. See you tomorrow. Take care." This way, the
One of the students who naturally stepped into this role was Patricia Mendoza, the 38-year-old mother of 3. She already had the discipline of a teacher in her bones. Years of lesson planning and late nights correcting papers had given her the patience to sit with confusion and slowly untangle it. After evening class, when most students hurried out to buses or jobs, Patricia would quietly stay behind, gathering her notes and tidying her desk. It began one night when Sophia, the 15-year-old, admitted she didn't fully understand Elias's explanation of conditionals. Patricia motioned her to sit down and pulled out colored pens. Soon they were diagramming if-then sentences on the whiteboard, laughter softening the edges of grammar drills. Word spread quickly. Within a week, Luis and Maria joined, eager but too shy to ask questions during the official lesson. A week later, Samuel brought his guitar, promising to play quietly while the others studied. Though in truth, he ended up improvising verb conjugations into his chords, making the session lively. Even Carlito, who usually joked his way through exercises, started showing up. At first, he came for the snacks Patricia brought, small bags of crackers and fruit. But he stayed when he realized she had a way of breaking things down without judgment. The sessions grew into something more than study time. Patricia would start by reviewing Elias's main points of the day, making sure the class understood his methods, how he taught silence as part of fluency, how he used patience to train confidence, how mistakes were not failures but stepping stones. She never tried to replace him. She wanted her classmates to see what she saw, that Elias' way of teaching was less about formulas and more about forming character. Sometimes she would quote him directly. "Remember what Elias said? 1 word lived well is better than 50 memorized." Then she would challenge the group to pick a single new phrase and use it in 3 different sentences before they left. Other times, she would replay the audio from class, pausing and letting everyone repeat together. Elias knew about the sessions. He passed by once and saw Patricia at the board, a semicircle of students around her, their notebooks open, faces lit not by stress but by curiosity. He didn't interrupt. Later, he only thanked her in his simple way, by carrying her heavy bag of textbooks out to the bus stop. Over time, the study group built its own rhythm. Yara, who rarely spoke in class, began sharing long, thoughtful answers there, encouraged by the smaller circle. Kenji tested himself by leaving his flashcards in his pocket and trying to speak freely. Even Olga, usually strict and sharp, softened in those late sessions, letting herself laugh when Sophia corrected her pronunciation. What started as one woman's quiet offer of help turned into a nightly ritual that stitched the classroom community tighter. For many, it was the place where Elias's lessons truly sank in. Not because he explained them again, but because Patricia and the others created space to live them out together. It became their shared secret. The classroom lights dimmed, the city humming outside, and a handful of students learning not just English, but how to carry each other forward. Do you want me to show you how Elias eventually energy, half from mischief? Elias knows the word on the board is dangerous. He writes in large, slow chalk letters. Beach. Carlito starts to giggle already. Elias raises one eyebrow. This word, he says, is beautiful, but if you pronounce it wrong, it becomes a curse. The room hushes. Olga folds her arms, waiting for the lesson. Elias's method 1, slow breakdown. Elias points. Slaya, long vowel, like in C. He holds the sound for 3 seconds. B. Ach, ch. The shech sound like church. Quick and clean, not sharp. Together. B. Ach. 2. Comparison drill. He writes 2 words. Beach, bitch, bitch. He says, beach has a long vowel. It stretches like the sand. Bitch is short, clipped like anger. Stretch the sound, or you insult someone instead of enjoying the ocean. Students repeat, laughing nervously. 3. Sentence practice. I go to the beach. A day at the beach is relaxing. We are walking on the beach. He makes them chant, holding the long E sound together like a choir. Beach, beach, beach. Student reactions. Sophia whispers the word carefully, afraid to say it wrong. Patricia pats her arm. You said it perfect. Luis exaggerates the long vowel and ends up sounding like a singer. The class claps. Carlito tries on purpose to say it wrong. Elias simply shakes his head. Carlito, you can fail grammar, but not respect. Say it right. The boy straightens, says clearly, beach. Mr. Green practices loudly. I am driving tourists to the beach. Everyone laughs. It sounds too real. Closing, Elias draws a quick sketch of waves on the board. Remember, a beach is long, so the vowel is long. When you stretch the sound, you stretch your respect. He sets the homework. Write 3 sentences about a day at the beach. Read them aloud at home. Record yourself if possible. Listen for the long vowel. The class leaves with the word echoing. Beach. Beach. Do you want me to turn this into a full mini-lesson script? Like a 10-minute TOEFL speaking practice on a day at the beach with pronunciation, vocabulary, and sample answers?